You are forbidden from even reporting on the news if it did not come from state-run media. If you do, you will be arrested. Your social media account will be deleted, and you will spend time in a re-education camp prison. You didn't toe the line. You're causing social chaos, as they call it. They like to call it social chaos. And you will be arrested.
Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age Conversations covers changes in our climate due to a new and intensifying grand solar minimum. In the media, overlooking, downplaying, or burying cold weather changes occurring on our planet. This is in order to keep the global warming agenda steaming full speed ahead. I do this podcast and radio program because we need to begin conversations on how to adapt our food growing strategies long before 2030 as agricultural zones shift, affecting global crop output, but very few mainstream media outlets are talking about the most important issue of our time, cold weather crop losses. Our sun is going through a 400-year cycle, which has effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the grand solar minimum? Then join me for Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David DuByne.
Now that's in China, and they have their own system, and they have their own thing going on over there. We globally, I guess, have accepted it as violations of everything left, right, and center is okay, as long as we get our stuff cheap. Awesome. They can go ahead and put up firewalls and political prisoners and organ harvesting and rights violations, and that's all great as long as we get cheap stuff, because all of the governments have never pushed back against that. So it must be part of the plan. Because the world I grew up in, people would take a stance and say, no, that's not good. But the new world we live in, it's like, cool, let's expand the economy. Who cares if you put a few people in a gulag for their political beliefs? Keep the bonds coming. That's the world we're living in reality. So the Chinese are trying to perfect this, and they're getting really good at the control and flow of information to the point where in that country, and this includes foreigners as well. Don't think you're just a foreigner, you're going to go over and visit, that you're outside the loop of this. This includes foreigners as well. If you have any kind of Weibo account or any type of, social media within China, Tencent, or anywhere you're floating around inside that sphere, if you as a foreigner share that information too, you are eligible for arrest in the country. And I want to focus on the weather here for a minute, because I had some people, I will not even say who they are. I'm not even going to tell you if it's man or woman. I'm going to protect them that much. Sent me some photos of some massive, massive floods over in Sichuan province. They were not allowed to talk about this. The government had come out and said it was a small flood and there were a couple homes that were flooded. But I've even put these images in a couple of my videos where they have entire homes floating down the river, buildings collapsing into the river, whole towns completely washed away due to substandard construction, drainage ditches breaking open, dam basins broke, all these types of things that were just poorly constructed, malfunction with the amount of water coming down. And it created, you should have seen the floods. It was biblical. And entire parts of the city were washed away. Now, people were arrested for sharing some of the photos, not the photos that were given to me, but for sharing that very same story that the state-run media in China had said, just a couple homes flushed away, and that's all you can report, period. And people went out and said, no, look at my backyard. I have all these photos, and I got this thing on my phone, and here's in my social account, and I wanted to show you the footage. Man, I can't believe like a quarter of our city washed away. They were arrested for sharing weather stories because it wasn't approved by the state-run media. The videos weren't approved videos. See, this is where it's going, is those videos that were shown of those houses and parts of the city being washed away, those were non-approved videos. They weren't approved by the state government to be released to the public. But citizens released them, and that was a no-no because it wasn't approved. Now, we're going straight into the Ministry of Truth here with this new link tax and this Article 11 and Article 13. It is unbelievable. that the European governments think that they can actually take control of the planet's internet. You know, China hasn't even tried that. China's just happy sitting over there controlling China within their own little bubble and having their own little firewall up there. Great, let them do that. We've all condoned it, obviously. Unless you're on the street out there with a sign, all the governments condoned it. Nobody's taken a stance and said, don't do it. They've even bent over backwards to help this thing go forward in China. But look how far it's gone there, that they've actually implemented those laws to arrest people just for weather stories that weren't approved. Now, where are we going to go with this? This is the first caveat and the first foot in the door to do the exact same thing on a global level here. You know, they say the fallout from the decision will be far-reaching and then the final vote will be in January 19th. Here's the thing. They snuck that upload filter directive, Article 13, in at the last moment in the vote. It wasn't there before. Just the link tax was. And they snuck that in, and everybody voted on it and said, great, we're going to approve this. What else are they going to sneak in on the final vote, then, that we don't see or can't know about? Because it's all secret until it's passed. This was not up for public debate. This was not up for public scrutiny, public viewing, public review, public comment, zero. This was a full-on secretive agenda passed by the oligarchs to control your ability to pass information. Now, I think, as well as Christian and a few others out there, that this is all to stop the flow of information of the Grand Solar Minimum when the crop losses get to the point where it's going to destabilize governments. Because how many percent of the bottom population cannot eat before they start to throw a spanner into the works here? Let's say 10% of any one country. It could be anywhere. I'll even use the United States because a lot of you listening tonight are from the U.S. I'm from the U.S. I know this culture the best. I can talk about it. Let's say the bottom 10% on food assistance cannot afford their basic necessities due to the food tripling in price. And something happens where the government can't keep up with the food costs because it's happening too fast. So the laws they're passing to raise the EBT or the food assistance programs is, 6 months behind, maybe 8 months behind the real cost of the food. And these people start rioting in the streets and looting supermarkets and banditry like we saw down in Venezuela, where they were stopping trucks on the roads and just pilfering anything of food off the trucks. I saw this most incredible video. I'm sure you can look this up. They stopped a truck with 5,000 chickens on it. And there must have been 200 or 300 people out there, and they just went up and ripped these boxes of live chickens off the truck, just toppling them onto the highway. And people were running out, smashing open the boxes with the heels of their shoes and, grabbing chickens. Oh, you need to see the video as to where it can go when people get desperate. So let's go back to the mind experiment here. Bottom 10% of any country can't afford to eat at all anymore because food's too expensive, and then the next year is going to be even worse because the crops are going to be diminished further in the yields. From this point forward, I tell you what, this is the last year we have had stable harvest seasons on this planet, at least for the next decade. Now, it's not going to last indefinitely, and no, it won't. We're going to go through a small correction and a squeeze point for humanity here. This is where your armament is. This is where your quiver of arrows is to understand the information. So you can move out. You can come with understanding, not fear. You can find your niche. You can help people. You can create a difference, and you can provide value as we move forward. That's the reason I do the channel. That's the reason I spend my time here. I got 2 hours I've been talking to you. The reason I spend my 2 hours here is so we're all in this together, and I hope you're more informed. And I hope we move together as an informed body of people. The only way to take control back is enough people say no at the same time that they understand that we have more power than they do. And it's time for us to utilize that power and say no to a lot of these laws that are being passed. I didn't condone that. I had no vote on this. I had no say, and I don't accept it. That I can't even share my thoughts and ideas on what I see in a news story because they're going to try to tax that, and now the platforms are going to cut everybody's speech off. Forget free speech. I'm just talking speech is going to be cut. What happens when one city starts igniting from food riots and they don't want you to report that to the next city? You know, information flow is dangerous today because the people that are in power or consider themselves in power have no control over it any longer. It's a genie out of the bottle. Cryptocurrency is the same thing. The genie's out the bottle, and it's not going to be put back in. So the global corporate-controlled media is going to have a very specific narrative to feed you and push your emotions. They know what to say. They know what stimulus to give you, so you will react in a certain way. The outcome's already known. They've been studying this for, a century or more. They know if they push button A, you will do reaction B. They already know that. Now, when it comes to trying to keep a cohesive government together and keep cities from burning to the ground, they're not going to want you sharing information on what's happening. Hungry people are desperate people. They're going to be doing crazy things that it's, some of these movies that we see about the zombie hordes walking around, I really believe that's what it's going to be with the masses of starving people. Now just switch it. They're trying to say it's a virus. Well, what if it is a computer virus where you can't get money out of your ATM? It's a computer virus. The just-in-time delivery credit system broke down. Created all these zombies because they can't eat. They're walking around looking for food, hordes of them. Maybe if you just switch a couple little pieces in that narrative in those movies, it makes more sense. So let's take a look here. I'm going to finish up with the Article 1113. It even applies to companies like Google when they link their stories. So let's say the Google search engine. See, I think some of the big tech's going to push back against this law because this is going to be affecting Google as well. So even if Google in their Google search engine links to a story, the person that created the story can demand a paid license from that. Sharing of unlicensed copyrighted material. So Google links to that Guardian article that I talked about the food crop losses, but they say, hey, wait a minute, we didn't give you authorization to link to us. Now you have to pay us a tax. So what is Google just going to start delisting everything because they don't want to pay the tax? How many YouTube videos are out there talking about the news? Is YouTube going to come back in and then delist every video that's ever talking about news because they don't want to pay the tax? Oh, well, legally we can. It's a private company. We can delist every video that ever had talked about news because we don't want to pay anything. Facebook. Now you can share cat photos. Awesome. That is the way to work. I just want to see more cats, actually. I haven't seen enough white fluffy kitties on the Facebook posts yet. Give me more because I can't talk about food crop losses. This is kind of where the whole thing is moving. And again, the burden's going to be on the smaller platforms to try to keep up with the link tax and the upload filters. So the article continues on here, and they say even Wikipedia founder Jimmy Wales and the World Wide Web inventor Tim Berners-Lee are super strongly against the directive because their whole platforms, or at least Wikipedia, is all linked on linking. It's all based on linking out to other links that provide credence or credibility to some of the pages that are in there in Wikipedia. Now, Wikipedia in itself, you could go on for days and days about censorship inside that platform and how you are unable to edit or add edits into those pages on Wikipedia that are on sensitive subjects. Like go into the global warming page and try to put anything about solar cycles, not going to happen. That is one of the most tightly controlled pages on Wikipedia. As well, 9/11, go in there and try to talk about Building 7 collapsing, and you're not going to get anywhere. That won't even make it through the sandbox. They have people on those pages 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to scrub whatever kind of edits come in. So you can see where we're going. Now I want to come back to talk about the Gutenberg Printing Press. I want to take you back in the 1500s here. Gutenberg Printing Press, 1600s, modern minimum, same time, right? Ottoman Empire forbid any type of typesetting in Arabic language and forbid anything or anyone to have a Gutenberg printing press. If you had a Gutenberg printing press and you were caught in the Ottoman Empire with the printing press, you were burned alive. That is crazy how badly they did not want that in there. They were afraid of the spread of uncontrolled information. This is not a new thing. This goes back millennia. This goes back millennia when people were terrified. Roman Empire, terrified that you would spread information. Go back into Russia. Anybody who even had a typewriter in Russia was arrested and sent to gulags because, again, they were afraid that you could spread information that was non-state controlled, not state authorized. Ottoman Empire, Gutenberg Printing Press. Rest of Europe adopted the technology, and the Ottoman Empire was left in the dust, never to return. They have not led on anything in the last, 100 years, let's say. So you can see that trying to suppress technologies that allow communication often backfire. Now, the Ottoman Empire was just a single point on this planet, so it bordered itself and roped itself off. No printing press in there, no technology like advancement inside ways of communication. But the rest of the world outside was, thriving and flourishing and spreading information and sharing and finding new ways to communicate and come together and create groups and organize a network. And then from there was the next step and the next step and the next step. But where are we now when we come to this? It's a global thing. Now, there's one little gray area in there where it says that the member states are able to implement the policies the way they deem fit. Now, this is another great, amazing gray area. Maybe somebody left that in there on purpose because there has to be at least some light in the darkness the oligarchs of unelected officials in Europe. So you start to see the break already in immigration policy in Hungary, for example, Poland. There's a lot of countries over there, Czechoslovakia, or I should say Czech Republic and the old Czech lands, Croatia. They absolutely do not want any immigration into their countries, and they are fighting tooth and nail against the oligarchs and the unelected officials to say, you're not dictating immigration policy in our country. We're our own sovereign country. Italy's pushing for it as well. They don't want any more immigration coming in. And now they're starting to take a stand and push back. So I'm wondering if the same thing's going to happen with this internet censorship bill that's out of Europe, where member states will be like, well, not here. If it's not a cohesive action against all and amongst all member states in the EU, I think that it might not work. I mean, you see what has happened so far with the EU trying to regulate the rights that you give to a website to collect your data for privacy. Some websites have just banned everybody from Europe coming. That was one simple way. But again, it's like the Gutenberg Printing Press. Do you ban everybody from coming to your site? I mean, how much of your traffic's from Europe? How much revenue is that going to cost? How many eyeballs? How many possible communication networks could that knock down out of your network by just banning Europe altogether? So it seems that a lot of people have taken the steps to get the privacy data. So every time you click onto a site, you have to click that little button that says, yes, I understand you're collecting this. Yes. You can put a cookie on my computer. Yes. You can do all this. All right. So a lot of sites and companies have gone through the trouble to accommodate the European laws on the internet. But this is an entirely different animal here. We are talking completely shutting off all communication between parties here if this global link tax and the content upload filter goes through in the European Union and it spreads globally. So then you have to think about alternative methods to communicate. Are we talking about going back to the ham radio? And I'm so thankful that Freedom Slips here allows this program to be broadcast. Revolution Radio Studio A, still a value point, freedom to be able to speak like this about these very same issues. But talking about these headlines and the news titles, at what point does some larger body come and say, hey, you guys are broadcasting news about news and you're not paying your link tax? They're talking about things that are copyrighted. You don't have your upload filter for audio on. At what point does it stop? And actually, what point do we stop it? It shouldn't even be stopped by itself. It should be actively stopped by everybody listening and everybody pushing back against the EU directives. This is unacceptable, totally unacceptable. And it only stops when we say it stops. You understand that in life. Like, these things only stop when we say it stops. Not when they dictate it stops. When we say enough, it stops. You notice that every time in history, when the masses say enough, it stops because they just can't get away with it anymore of their blind subservience to whatever they say. Have you noticed that? It is a trend in history that always continues. The masses dictate what the rulers can get away with, or they try to get away with. And I hate to even use the word rulers because I don't see them ruling over myself. I see a bunch of sociopaths at the top in their little club up there trying to pretend that they rule over stuff and having jackboot thugs come in and try to push policy on others. But again, it's the same thing. If you get enough jackboot thugs coming in and the neighborhood stand up or a city stands up, you can drive them out. Bundy Ranch. Remember that? Feds came in and all the local people got together and then pushed the feds out. And they never came back, did they? That was another instance of standing up and saying, enough is enough. You're not welcome. It doesn't work here. Go back. And these internet taxes and these internet link taxes are the exact same thing. The censorship is unacceptable on the net. It can't go anymore. Because your life's really going to be on the bound here. Your life will be in the hands of this internet law. If you cannot share information on where the losses are happening, where you can access food, where you can find food, what's happening, where the riots are, what's happening, where the shipping channels are open, where the banks are still working, where everything's still functioning, and you have an access point to come in and draw resources to you, well, they're cutting off your lifeline, literally. And at this point, I really believe this is a life or death choice for people with this type of information sharing left on the net. This is it. This comes down to this. If they are able to get away with this, the entire planet turns into China. It turns into global communist, socialist control. And that's the road that's going to go down if this is accepted with just blind subservience. It will not. This is a crossroads of humanity right here, whether we accept this or do not. And you really need to look into what's happening with this particular set of laws going on and the reasons they don't want you to communicate amongst each other. It's not about that they're trying to stop it. It's the reasons that they don't want you to communicate. Like, for example, I'm over here on 9news.com Australia talking about temperatures plunging below average across South Australia, wiping out crops. Okay, the new link tax, I will not be allowed to share this inside Facebook with you. I will not be allowed to talk about it or put it in my social media stream to talk about how many of the crops are being lost in Australia and then what the pull will be on the futures market comparatively. That will be unacceptable, and I won't be able to share it, nor will you be able to even know what's going on in the outside world. Now, if I bring you over to Polar Portal, which is run by the Danish government, it's a sea ice monitoring site. If we come over here to the sea ice thickness and volume on Polar Portal, and I look and I say, whoa, the melt season has stopped already. And it looks like we have the, what's that, fourth or fifth least amount of ice, which means ice has gained back, right? Because 2007 was the very least amount of ice for the year. And then we came back and it looks like 2016 was another really, really low year. But then the ice is much more than these last couple of years. So this is scientific data. This can still be shared under the new law. Apparently, this is not copyrighted, and I might say yet. So what would it take for the global oligarchs to not want you to share this information because they want to be telling you it's CO2 and you're responsible, and they want to try to drive global taxes because you're changing the environment? In reality, it's the sun causing so many of these changes going on with the human input of particulate pollution, not CO2. But what if they were to pass laws in their own countries to now make all of this scientific data coming off of, research sites funded by your tax dollars? What if they're going to suddenly flip that in the laws and make all of this copyrighted information? Then you won't even be able to share the sea ice thickness through the new link tax. You see where we're going with this? Like, how far are they going to take it? But they have a very, very short time window to do so because the changes you're seeing, they're already amplifying, and this is just the cusp. Like all these food crop losses and the 10, 12, 13% inflationary food price structures going on across the planet now, that's just the beginning. 10% this year, 70% next year, 150 the following year, and you're looking at double prices, right? At what point do they start to make the scientific data copyright so you can't share it? Now, let's say that's my next. You can already see where they're trying to go with this thing. So you just have to take the steps out there with them in their minds. They're going to try to control this data so you can't share it. They're going to start with the thing, oh, you can't share movies. Fine. We already did that back in the Napster days. Can't share music, whatever. All these sites where you used to be able to go on and take a look at free movies. What was that? Movie 4K, something like this. Movie 2K, where you used to be able to go in and just wind up a whole bunch of movies and watch them streaming for free. Understood. Okay, those are all closed. Now they're coming down to you can't even share a news story. And then what are they going to do? I can see them already going for this. You're not even going to be able to share scientific data. And then I could see it, the final thing, if you decide to write your own commentary on it, they're just going to shut down the ability for you to communicate, because even if you have your own copyrighted material that they deem is unacceptable to share, they're just not going to give you a way to share it, which means they're going to go back to the Gutenberg Printing Press days, and they're going to become the Ottoman Empire. They're going to fall so far behind because our ability to communicate in the new tech world is miles ahead of that. How about going old school like the ham radio? Can you imagine how ironic it would be if the new information dissemination and the biggest stations on the planet were ham radio operators that were going against? That's funny. Think about that. It's going to move a lot of people to the dark web. You know, and again, they've scared you to death for ages about the dark web. The dark web is so scary. It's just drugs. It's just murderers. It's just this and that in the dark web. Well, actually, in reality, 99.999% of it is people who are oppressed groups communicating outside the oppression mechanisms inside their own countries. I'll agree there's some nastiness on the dark web. Yep, there is. But you notice the media has pushed that is the only thing on the dark web. There's so many groups that communicate there that can't do it openly above the ground on the World Wide Web because they'd be persecuted, arrested, and murdered by the governments in the countries they live in. So again, you see a coordinated effort across all corporate media to just demonize that dark web, that don't even go there, don't even look at it. If you look at it, your eyes are going to burn out and you're just going to fall out of your skull just by even looking at a single address on that thing. And I mean, many of you listening probably got that same exact feeling when I said dark web. You're like, ooh, dark web. But it's a way an enormous amount of people communicate that are oppressed groups across this planet at the moment. So is it going to move down there? What about buying your own satellite? I mean, there's satellites for rent. I mean, you got to go outside the box here. If people are going to try to cut down your ability to communicate, you're going to have to be a couple steps ahead of thinking, all right, what can I control around my own local environment that I can still use to disseminate this information? Should I buy my own private satellite, one that's almost defunct and not really used by any networks anymore? Should I buy that and use it as my own private satellite? How far can you go? What do you think are ways that we could communicate without having to rely on traditional internet, that the messages could still be pushed across? Because remember, they've been telling us, and I'm going to come over here to Dr. Roy Spencer's site, they've been telling us again and again and again, it's the hottest year ever, and July was the hottest ever, and oh my gosh, if you just even went outside, you melted. And the tar, you know, the roads across the planet all melted this year. People couldn't even drive because every road on the planet melted. Our economy is going to have a very difficult time continuing past, say, the next 12, 18 months maximum. I'm going to say maximum. That's just because if the food prices rise, people just don't spend money in the other parts of the economy. They just spend money on food. Now, the thing about the University of Alabama Huntsville version 6.0, so they were saying that these satellite temperatures were unusable because they weren't peer-reviewed. And so this is the way they were trying to discredit Dr. Roy Spencer last year, was they're saying that version 5.0, 5.6, 4.6, 4.3, these are some of the older versions of the satellite temperature data sets that they were running, that the global media was coming out, the corporate media was saying, well, you can't use, that's not even peer-reviewed, that's just garbage science, you're not even peer-reviewed, and you're trying to give us all these Well, he was showing that the global temperatures are dropping comparatively to what Real Climate Analyzer are. That's the hottest temperatures on the web. If you want to write an article and you want to get the warmest temperatures globally that you can possibly get off of any data set, go to Real Climate Analyzer. They're also known as Climate Reanalyzer. You can find that one pretty easy. That's the one the Washington Post loves to use when they talk about global warming. New York Times loves that one because it runs the hottest on the web, so they can guarantee they can get a hot reading off of that. And, these temperatures vary as much as 2 degrees Celsius on the data sets between University of Alabama, Huntsville, and also Climate Reanalyzer. That's ridiculous that you have this much of a difference between the satellite data sets. So UAH runs, I wouldn't say the coldest, but it's right along there with RSS, somewhere in there. And these are always cooler than the Reanalyzer site that the mainstream media, corporate media, loves to use. So the whole thing was that they were trying to discredit this, saying, well, it wasn't peer-reviewed, so you can't use that. It's not really the real temperatures. Scientists didn't look at it. The peers didn't come in and verify it. Well, you know what? It is peer-reviewed now. Version 6.0 is peer-reviewed. The algorithm's great. Everything works. And they're still trying to say, they're still trying to discredit it because it's showing cooling temperatures on our planet. Now, I agree. There's some places that are hotter. There's some places that are having hot spots on the planet, but there's other places that are cold that never get reported on, and that's the information I try to bring. 4 seasons in one weekend. Australia, summer heat to polar blast in a single day, and that's interesting how the weather is flipping like this, and we're going to start to see a lot more of this moving into, the depths of the Grand Solar Minimum as we get further down into it. So if we go over here to icehnow.info, Robert Felix's site, one of my favorites. I always check here daily to see what he has. Edmonton, all-time record snows. And this is going to come right back to the crop harvest again, which brings me into the cryptocurrency as well. See, our economy is going to have a very difficult time continuing past, say, the next 12, 18 months maximum. I'm going to say maximum. Just because if the food prices rise, people just don't spend money in the other parts of the economy. They just spend money on food, and that's it. Money still is made and money is still spent, but it's all just diverted over into one little tiny sector, food. Now, if the economy is not functioning, and you have a secondary alternative to try to store some of your wealth, and you can throw a few bucks over on this thing over here called crypto, that's going to probably go up as more people put more money in it to try to get more safety. People might run to precious metals. Maybe. We saw that in the past. But now there's a much faster, much quicker, much easier alternative that's not so heavy that you can take anywhere on the planet. And as long as you got this little tiny thing the size of a memory stick, you can load all your cash in that thing. And it's ultra secure on a hardware wallet. Nobody's going to be able to get into it unless you give them either the password or if they're going to find your private key. All right. But traveling around the planet with this little thing the size of a memory stick with your entire bank account in there versus, trying to lug around 3 kilos of gold, that's a huge difference. You're not going to get through an airport with 1 kilo or 2 of gold on your back. Economy starts to decrease because food prices start to increase. People start to shift their wealth in different places. Younger generation, they don't believe in banks at all. They don't trust them. They've seen nothing but trouble from the institutional banking system since they've been alive. Where do you think they're going to put their money? Especially if the economy starts to go down again. I mean, they're not going to live through it again and go 2.0. I love it. Hey, everybody jump for joy. They're going to start to move their money into crypto assets. What I have seen is this massive move up in Ripple. Now, this is the banker's coin here. So what are they sending as a signal to the rest of the planet? And this is the second time it's happened this week. Second time that Ripple's run up. This is the second time. So what's going on with the signaling here of the banker's coin skyrocketing twice in a week? Now, remember, 3 is a numerologically, say, valuable number, if you will. 3, 6, and 9. So if we see it for the third time, that is a signal to somebody else out there on the greater markets. 3 is a charm, and 3 times a banker coin running up is definitely a signal. There's been a lot of conjecture on when this next bull run is going to begin. This is not a financial advice. I'm just talking about crypto and what I'm thinking about in my own opinion. It's not financial advice, not meant to be, nor should it be. I'm just talking about something that I see in the future. You got to do your own research. Don't even listen to me. Do your own research. The whole thing was if Bitcoin broke below 5,500, that it was going to continue down to like 2,000 or something, and then it's hit that bottom. And once it held resistance there, it was supposed to hold. It should start. This should be the beginning of the new bull run. So I've been told. So I've read. So I've heard like 1,000 videos say the same thing. Now you have to realize it's January 1st. Some of the laws are being passed where fund managers are going to be able to allocate 2% of their portfolio into cryptocurrency, because a lot of people have been demanding that they get their retirement funds and at least some of the management funds under management put into cryptocurrency so they could scrape some of the gains that were happening globally. This was demanded by some of the holders in the funds. So I'm over here on CoinDesk.com if you're going to follow along as I'm chatting out these next 15 minutes, bring us to the end of the broadcast here tonight. Now, the SEC, that's our Securities and Exchange Commission, they have been the number one stumbling block for anything moving forward in crypto. Word is on the street that JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, etc., have been pushing the SEC to limit what can happen with ICOs and movement in crypto while they're waiting to consolidate cheaper prices behind the scenes. They've been trying to suppress the price because on January 1st, they're able to come in with some institutional money on January 1st. So they have been lobbying, is that a correct word to use, politely, the SEC to limit movement in any type of instruments in crypto. SEC moves to make decision on VanEck SolidX Bitcoin ETF proposal. Now, if you don't know what that means, ETF is the exchange traded fund where everything about it is Bitcoin related. It's Bitcoin futures, Bitcoin in terms of, like, if there's no better word of a physical Bitcoin. I know there's no such thing, but one in a hard wallet is yours. Plus the Bitcoin futures, both minis and 5 lots, and everything's based around the price of what's going with the mining, and they had all these other things, just like a regular ETF. If you have a corn ETF, it's about the corn producers, the farmers, the storage facilities, the silos, and everything in between, even up to, like General Mills and all these cereal makers. So they have stocks in all these companies. So if one falls, the rest won't really push the price too much in the ETF. They can substitute it out and take a minimal loss, but still retain the overall amount of the portfolio generally. There's a couple companies that have been wanting to do this with Bitcoin in terms of mining rigs, mining companies, and all this other things related to the Bitcoin futures. And like I said, the physicals, if you will. SEC has been saying, no way, can't do that, can't touch it. But I really believe the SEC is have these like little puppet strings above them with the really big institutional banks making the SEC move and make everything illegal, make everything move in super slow molasses motion, while they, behind the scenes, are consolidating all the crypto. So when it hits and the institutional money flows in, we're talking about trillions, plural, market cap. And anything you're holding out there that's a penny now is going to be dollars. Just like we saw in this last run-up. Coming down in another one of the headlines here that goes right along with what the SEC was doing. They're trying to finally put some ruling on the ETF. Now, you got to realize, if they say that ETF is a go, oh my gosh, just on that word alone, the market's going to spike just because the American government gave authorization and okay, go ahead for institutional money to jump into Bitcoin. And then now we have a second headline right here. U.S. lawmakers strongly urge the IRS to update crypto tax guidance, which means IRS make a law so it can get taxed, and then we're off to the races. Now notice how they are doing it now. So when it comes up to April 15th of next year, the laws will have been updated and you will be required to pay tax. Because right now it's in a gray area. You know how these taxes are going to be calculated. So think about that. Now, how coincidental is these two things dovetailing at the exact same time when it's been suppressed for so long? And then suddenly these two articles coming out and the gains in the Ripple coin, the banker's coin, Ripple. 3 things in the same time, all revolving around institutional money. I can't believe that's a coincidence. I really can't. Statistically, almost an impossibility. Now, one sad thing, and for me personally, is Enigma is delaying their release of the Discovery Protocol. That would allow you to do secret contracts and initiate secret contracts. Actually, they're smart contracts that are done in a secret way. So secret contracts are a new form of a smart contract that is non-traceable. Now, if you're using Monero and you're going to be doing a secret contract using Monero as your exchange on the Enigma platform, you're absolutely untraceable. Now, think about that with food being really expensive in the future. You're not going to let people know how much food holding you have, what you're trading with food, what you're buying with food. When food's incredibly expensive and it's like people are looting stores for food, would you want people to know that you have 100 tons of wheat stored somewhere, that you bought 100 tons of wheat? Of course not. You're going to want to be as secret and quiet as a church mouse you can be about your food holdings. This was going to be one of the ways that would allow that. You got the privacy coins mixed in with the secret contracts. This is the future. This is my opinion, though. This is where it's going. The protocol roadmap needs to be. But anyway, you can see things are moving. Economy's slipping. It's fictitious at the moment. But as we move forward, crypto is going to be used more and more. So, I just encourage you to even learn about it. This is from an educational aspect. Just to go ahead and learn what it is. It's going to be used in the future. Just like if I would have been sitting here talking to you saying, you know what, you might want to learn about this internet thing. You might want to learn what a computer is. We're going to be using these things in the future. And, there's this new website stuff coming out and people are probably going to buy and sell stuff on these websites. You might want to learn how to, what e-commerce is, something like this. It's nothing more than that. Like we would be sitting in the early 1990s talking about the internet at the moment. Same thing. So I encourage you just to at least dive in to understand what the tech is, how it's working, because it is going to be an integral part of your life as we move forward. Like all these changes are here. They're intensifying. And you have a lot of knowledge. There's so many people out there talking about these issues at the moment. So there's really not an excuse for you to lay back and say, well, I don't know about it. I'm too old to learn. I'm not good at learning new stuff. Well, you know what you're going to have to be. You're going to have to be adaptable during these times of change. That's going to be a great strength for you to be able to be adaptable. See the signs around you. Know that things are changing. It's always going to change. If you flow with it instead of fighting it, it's going to be way easier as well. And if you know why these things are happening, it's going to be even double easier because you're not coming from fear. There's just so many positives to knowing what's going to happen. There'll be a few negatives. But people are going to start to look at you because you have some knowledge about this. So anyway, I encourage you to go through the week, do a little research, talk to some farmers if you have a chance, dig through your own local news, see where there's frost or some kind of unusual, strange weather. I do thank you for your time. My name is David DuByne, the host of Mini Ice Age Conversations here on Studio A Revolution Radio, 10 p.m. to midnight, Studio A.